Few rappers have ever stared down a death penalty charge and lived to rap about it. Lil Boosie did. Federal investigators, state prosecutors, undercover operations, jailhouse confessions, and lyrics picked apart as evidence. All of it was aimed directly at him. The case prosecutors built looked airtight on paper. They had a witness, cell phone records, and recordings they believed told the whole story. Then the trial started, and everything they thought they had began falling apart in ways nobody could have predicted. Now, anytime the conversation turns to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, one name always comes up: Torrance Hatch Jr., better known as Lil Boosie or Boosie Badazz. Boosie grew up in Baton Rouge with both of his parents, but having both of them under one roof didn't mean life was peaceful. Home was chaotic. His father was a respected street figure, and the lifestyle that came with it often spilled into the house. Boosie witnessed things no child should ever have to see, including his father abusing his mother during some of their worst moments. Still, Boosie never let those painful memories erase the love he had for his dad. While his brother kept his distance, Boosie stayed right by his father's side. He looked up to him, followed him around the neighborhood, and learned the streets directly from him. To Boosie, his father wasn't just another man in the house, he was his hero. That's why losing him changed everything. Before Boosie even turned 14, his father died after battling a brain tumor. But over the years, rumors have continued to circulate that he may have actually been murdered. Whatever the truth was, one thing is certain: that loss flipped Boosie's entire world upside down. After his father's death, Boosie moved in with his grandmother, but life didn't suddenly get easier. The neighborhood around him was still filled with hustlers, gangsters, and drug dealers. Trouble was everywhere he looked, so whenever he wanted to escape that reality, he turned to two things that gave him peace: basketball and rap. On the court, people believed he had real talent. Even though he wasn't the tallest player, his skills spoke for themselves. Many thought college scholarships were waiting for him if he stayed focused. But life had other plans. With his father gone and his mother struggling to keep food on the table, Boosie felt the pressure to become the man of the house while he was still just a teenager. Sitting on the sidelines wasn't an option in his mind. He wanted to help his family, and instead of getting a regular job, he leaned deeper into the same streets he had grown up around, chasing money any way he knew how. Little by little, basketball faded into the background. The streets became his everyday reality, and music became the only place where he could let everything out. Rap wasn't just something he did for fun, it became therapy. By the late 1990s, that passion started opening doors. Boosie joined the Baton Rouge rap collective concentration camp after being introduced to C-Loc, who quickly took the young rapper under his wing. Before long, Boosie was making appearances on projects like Thug Brothers and C-Loc's It's a Gamble. His voice was impossible to ignore. The delivery was raw, the stories were real, and every verse sounded like it came straight from the neighborhood. Songs like Outlaw had people paying attention because Boosie wasn't pretending to live that life, he was living it. Knowing the streets wanted more, he wasted no time dropping his first solo album, Youngest of Da Camp. The momentum only kept building. By 2001, his buzz around Louisiana had grown so big that it caught the attention of UGK legend Pimp C. Under Pimp C's guidance, the 19-year-old signed with Trill Entertainment and started putting together a catalog that would make him one of the biggest names in Southern rap. Albums like For My Thugs and Bad Ass, along with classic collaborations like Ghetto Stories and Gangsta Music alongside his longtime friend Webby, helped turn Boosie into a household name. His music wasn't just reaching Baton Rouge anymore. People across the country and eventually around the world connected with his honesty. Every record sounded like pages pulled straight from his life. At the same time, Boosie's reputation wasn't built on music alone. In the streets, he was known as somebody who stood on business. Even as a young man, people respected him, and he carried himself like someone who was always ready for whatever came his way. But living that kind of life usually comes with a price. Eventually, law enforcement put him squarely in their sights. That moment finally arrived in October 2008 when deputies from the East Baton Rouge Sheriff's Office pulled Boosie over. During the stop, officers found marijuana, a blunt, another controlled substance, and a firearm inside the vehicle. The charges were serious. He was hit with third offense, marijuana possession, and illegally carrying a firearm while possessing a controlled substance. At first, he was staring down the possibility of spending up to 10 years behind bars. Fortunately for Boosie, his attorneys managed to negotiate a favorable plea agreement. Instead of risking a decade in prison, the deal reduced his sentence to a maximum of 2 years, with only 1 year guaranteed. It was a huge break, but the judge made one thing perfectly clear. That second chance came with strict conditions. If Boosie violated the agreement even once, there would be no more leniency. He was placed on house arrest with an ankle monitor, and every move he made was being watched. It didn't take long before things started falling apart. Authorities discovered that the 26-year-old rapper had violated the terms of his house arrest several times. Once those violations came to light, District Court Judge Chip Moore revoked the original agreement. Instead of serving the lighter sentence he had negotiated, Boosie's punishment became much harsher. What had once looked like a chance to avoid serious prison time suddenly turned into years behind bars. One bad decision after another had chipped away at the opportunity he had been given. Now he was preparing to serve real time, leaving behind 7 children with an 8th on the way. Boosie had survived the streets his entire life, but he had no idea that prison wasn't going to be the hardest chapter of his story. The worst was still waiting around the corner. In early June 2010, law enforcement across Baton Rouge decided it was time to make a major move. Local police, state investigators, and federal agents teamed up to crack a string of murders and attempted murders that had been terrorizing South Baton Rouge. As investigators started connecting the dots, indictments began rolling out one after another. Eventually, that investigation landed right on Lil Boosie's doorstep. Almost overnight, Boosie found himself charged with first-degree murder in connection with the 2009 killing of Terry Boyd. He wasn't arrested alone either. 8 other men were also taken into custody as part of a case tied to 6 different homicides. But out of everybody involved, one person held Boosie's future in his hands. A 17-year-old named Mike Louding, better known around Baton Rouge as Marlo Mike. If Marlo stuck to his story, Boosie could end up on death row. Marlo's nickname wasn't random. It came straight from Marlo Stanfield, the ruthless drug kingpin from The Wire. And in many ways, people around him felt the nickname fit. He grew up in one of Baton Rouge's roughest neighborhoods, where violence was just another part of everyday life. Before he was even old enough to drive, he'd already watched a man get shot and killed right in front of him. School never really stood a chance. By 7th grade, he was expelled after bringing a gun onto campus. Later, he was sent to a military-style youth program that finally gave him some structure. For a moment, it looked like he might be turning things around. But once he returned to regular school, everything unraveled again. He was expelled a second time. His sister later admitted that Marlo struggled with serious anger issues, although she insisted he wasn't the type to randomly attack people. Then, at just 14 years old, Marlo moved into Boosie's home. That decision immediately worried his mother. She started questioning the kind of influence Boosie was having on her son. Around the same time, Marlo opened up to her about hearing voices in his head. She desperately tried convincing him to get professional help, but he refused. He believed that if doctors found out what was happening, they'd lock him away forever. As he got older, crime became his way of making money. Marlo never held a steady job. Whenever he needed cash, he hit the streets. Most of that money went toward feeding his drug habit. He admitted his favorite drugs were marijuana and scissor, the dangerous mixture of promethazine, codeine, and soda that had become popular in Southern rap culture. To keep funding that lifestyle, he sold drugs, committed robberies, and stayed involved in whatever could bring in quick money. None of it came out of nowhere. By the time investigators dug into his past, they found an extremely long juvenile record. It included charges ranging from simple battery, criminal damage, trespassing, robbery, resisting arrest, and drug possession, to unauthorized use of a vehicle, illegal handgun possession as a minor, reckless driving, speeding, and hit and run. Despite all of that, serious punishment rarely came. Most of his cases ended with deferred prosecution or informal probation, allowing him to return right back to the streets. Detectives eventually described Marlowe in chilling terms, calling him a teenage hitman with the mind of a maniac who claimed voices in his head constantly told him to kill. And somehow, that description wasn't far off. Marlowe later confessed to 9 murders, saying his first killing happened when he was only 15 years old. But that's where Boosie's problems really began. According to Marlowe's first confession, Boosie paid him $2,800 to murder Terry Boyd. That single statement instantly turned Boosie into the prosecution's biggest target. Investigators believed they finally had the witness they needed. According to police, Terry Boyd was sitting on his couch watching television when gunfire suddenly ripped through the front window of the house. The attack happened just after midnight on October 21st, 2009. Investigators said 6 rounds from a 9mm handgun were fired through the window of the home on Vermilion Drive. When deputies arrived, Boyd was lying lifeless across a brown leather couch, bleeding heavily. A nearby resident reported seeing 2 men running toward railroad tracks shortly after the shooting. Police also learned Boyd had only been out of Wynn Correctional Center for about a month after serving 5 years in prison. Inside the home, detectives recovered a disposable camera, $400 in cash, and later discovered through toxicology testing that Boyd had morphine, marijuana, and codeine in his system. From that point forward, investigators leaned heavily on Marlowe Mike. They believed he was the key that could finally connect Boosie to the murder, and on paper, their case looked strong. Prosecutors had Marlowe's recorded jailhouse confession. They also had cell phone records that placed him near Boosie's recording studio both before and after the murder. Marlowe told investigators that hours before the shooting, he had been inside Boosie's studio with Adrian Pittman and Michael "Ghost" Judson. According to his story, they were reading a letter from an Angola prison inmate named Lee Lucas. The letter allegedly warned that Terry Boyd had recently been released from prison and was threatening Boosie. Marlowe claimed Boosie responded by putting a $25,000 bounty on Boyd's life. Later that night, Marlowe said Pittman drove him and Judson near Vermilion Drive before waiting inside a van. Once Judson spotted Boyd inside the house, Marlowe walked up and opened fire through the front window. After the shooting, Marlowe claimed Pittman drove them straight back to Boosie's house, where Boosie allegedly handed him $2,800 for carrying out the hit. Then investigators uncovered something else that caught everyone's attention. Just 2 weeks after Boyd's murder, Marlowe got a tattoo showing an AK-47 beside the words, asking Boosie who was next. For detectives, it looked less like body art and more like someone celebrating violence on his own skin. Police weren't finished building their case, though. They started digging through Boosie's music catalog, believing some of his lyrics lined up with the murder investigation. One song that immediately grabbed their attention was 187. In the track, Boosie references Marlowe and mentions either handing over the keys or handing over the money. According to court documents, investigators believe the lyric referred to payment for Boyd's murder. Another song, Body Bag, also landed under the microscope. When authorities raided Boosie's home, forensic computer specialist Constantino Dimitrelos seized hard drives containing music files, digital evidence, and even photographs, including one showing Marlowe's tattoo. After examining the files, investigators concluded that both 187 and Body Bag had been recorded on the same night Terry Boyd was killed. The deeper they looked, the more lyrics they believed supported their theory. On a song recorded in November 2009, Boosie rapped about using money to have people killed and keeping hitters on standby. Then investigators pointed to another track, Limelight featuring Hurricane Chris, where Boosie mentioned Marlo Mike sitting in the back seat asking for a body. To prosecutors, those lyrics weren't just entertainment. They believed they were pieces of a confession hidden inside music. Investigators also argued that another lyric from Limelight connected directly to Boosie's ongoing feud with fellow Baton Rouge rapper Chris Nussie Jackson. On February 10, 2009, shortly after returning to a friend's house, Nussie was ambushed and shot to death. His brother, Frederick Mitchell, was also wounded but survived. Although Boosie was never formally charged in Nussie's murder, investigators acknowledged that he had initially been considered a primary suspect after receiving tips alleging that a $30,000 contract had been placed on Nussie's life. By now, prosecutors believed they had assembled a powerful case against Boosie. They had Marlo Mike's confession. They had cell phone records. They had rap lyrics they argued mirrored real-life events. And if a jury believed all of it, Boosie wasn't just looking at prison. He was looking at the death penalty. Behind bars, the celebrity disappeared. There was no Lil Boosie anymore, only inmate number 560699. He spent much of his 52 months in solitary confinement, isolated from almost everyone. Years later, Boosie admitted that the experience changed him. He said the pressure of facing a possible death sentence left him constantly angry to the point where he would spit on prison guards because he simply didn't care anymore. In his mind, when someone believes they might be executed, another few months in solitary barely matters. Then things became even more complicated. In November 2011, authorities uncovered a plan to smuggle marijuana, ecstasy, and codeine into the prison. After that, Boosie was hit with another 8 years. The stress kept building. He later admitted he started having recurring nightmares about never leaving prison alive. Some nights, he even dreamed about Bleek's death, memories that continued haunting him long after they happened. Meanwhile, life outside prison wasn't any easier. According to Boosie, police constantly harassed members of his family back home, including his aunts and cousins. The pressure reached an ugly point when a complete stranger reportedly approached his 7-year-old daughter inside a Walmart and told her that her father was going to die in prison. Even inside the prison walls, Boosie said the hostility never stopped. He recalled one correctional officer waking him up for no reason other than to tell him they couldn't wait to see him executed. At that point, it felt like everyone had already decided how Boosie's story was going to end. The only question left was whether a jury would see it the same way. By May 2012, Boosie's long-awaited murder trial was finally underway. The courtroom had become the center of attention after nearly 2 years of headlines and speculation. The good news for Boosie was that prosecutors were no longer seeking the death penalty. The bad news? He was still staring down the possibility of spending the rest of his life behind bars. From the very beginning, his attorney, Jason Williams, came out swinging. Williams made it clear that Boosie had nothing to do with Terry Boyd's murder. Instead, he argued that the people with the real motive were Michael "Ghost" Judson and Adrian Pittman. According to the defense, Judson had been robbed by Boyd just weeks before the shooting, losing about $720 crore, while Pittman had his own long-running beef with Boyd. Williams also accused the state of putting Boosie on trial because of his image as a gangster rapper. He argued that prosecutors were trying to blur the line between rap lyrics and real life, especially since Boosie's music often criticized racism within law enforcement, including Parish District Attorney Hiller Moore III. The prosecution insisted the murder was sparked by a letter warning Boosie that Boyd planned to rob and attack him. The defense wasn't buying it. Williams argued that investigators never produced any such letter because it simply didn't exist. In fact, he told jurors that Boosie and Terry Boyd weren't enemies at all. Their families were connected, and Boosie even shared a child with Boyd's sister. Then came the moment that completely shook the prosecution's case. Everyone expected Michael Louding, better known as Marlo Mike, to point the finger directly at Boosie. Instead, he did the exact opposite. When Marlo took the witness stand, he stunned the courtroom by telling jurors that Boosie had absolutely nothing to do with Terry Boyd's death. And just like that, the prosecution's star witness completely unraveled. Without his testimony, The case against Boosie leaned almost entirely on circumstantial evidence, including cell phone records and rap lyrics prosecutors argued reflected a murderous mindset. Years later, Boosie spoke publicly about the ordeal. He said Marlo had always been like a son to him. He had even signed paperwork as his legal guardian when Marlo was in school. Because of that relationship, Boosie said he never carried hatred toward him, especially after receiving a letter from prison where Marlo apologized for everything and promised to make things right. In 2013, Marlo Mike was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. Boosie, meanwhile, walked out of prison a free man in March 2014. His parole officially ended 4 years later in 2018. Even during his time behind bars, Boosie refused to waste every moment. He earned his GED while incarcerated, determined to come out with something positive despite everything he'd been through. Freedom didn't mean life suddenly became easy, though. Shortly after his release, doctors diagnosed him with cancer. It was another battle, another obstacle. But once again, Boosie fought through it and came out on the other side. Around that same time, he fully embraced the name Boosie Badazz, landed a major deal with Atlantic Records, and continued building his own label, Bad Ass Entertainment. For a while, it looked like life was finally settling down, but trouble was never too far away. On May 6, 2023, San Diego police opened another case involving Boosie after spotting him during an Instagram Live hosted by someone authorities identified as an alleged neighborhood Crips member. Investigators believe they could clearly see a handgun tucked into Boosie's waistband during the live stream. Once officers identified him, they reportedly used aerial surveillance to follow his movements until they had an opportunity to stop his vehicle. During the traffic stop, Boosie denied having any firearms. Police searched anyway. Inside the vehicle, investigators found a loaded Glock 19 in the back seat. His security guard also turned over a loaded Springfield Hellcat pistol. Authorities later said DNA testing linked Boosie to both firearms, while records showed his girlfriend had originally purchased them in Georgia. The first federal indictment was eventually dismissed over procedural issues, but federal prosecutors weren't finished. In July 2024, they returned with a new 2-count indictment accusing Boosie of being a felon in possession of a firearm and ammunition, along with possessing firearms while being an unlawful drug user. Then, on August 26th, Boosie accepted a plea agreement and pleaded guilty to the felon in possession charge. Earlier that month, he addressed the situation on social media, telling fans he believed the case was behind him but had grown tired of fighting. After discussing it with his family, he decided accepting the plea deal was the right choice and asked supporters around the world to keep him in their prayers while encouraging them to check out his latest album. Then came another legal headache. In June 2026, Boosie found himself facing a felony aggravated assault charge in Harris County, Texas. According to investigators, the incident happened during Memorial Day weekend at Privilege nightclub in downtown Houston. Authorities allege everything started as the club was closing. A woman believed to be with Boosie's group reportedly tried to use the restroom after it had already been shut down. Security stepped in and began escorting her toward the exit. That's when prosecutors say the situation spiraled out of control. According to court records, as the security guard bent down near the doorway, Boosie allegedly struck him in the head with a heavy glass hookah base. The guard later told investigators that when he turned around, he saw Boosie holding the shattered hookah. He was rushed to the hospital where doctors reportedly used 8 staples to close the wound on his head. On June 1st, Boosie appeared in Harris County Court. A judge set his bond at $85,000. However, according to his attorney, it was handled as a walkthrough bond, meaning Boosie didn't have to remain in jail following the hearing. Boosie has denied the allegations from the very beginning. After leaving court, he described the entire case as nothing more than a money grab. His legal team has also urged the public not to rush to judgment until all of the evidence, witness statements, and any available surveillance footage have been reviewed. As things stand, the case is still ongoing. The aggravated assault charge remains an allegation, not a conviction, and Boosie is presumed innocent unless proven guilty in court. According to local reports, his next scheduled court appearance is set for September 15th.